Every scar is a lesson, that song was called. And it is, and we're all carrying battle scars of various kinds, and yet we're all still here. We're all still fighting. So, this is just one expose that will take us up to the final piece for tonight's show. And it's in two parts. And following on from Tuesday's show, highlighting the link to real-life situations formulated in movies, TV series, and also video games. And we need to highlight another of their game-playing shows. And it highlights important social issues and also the depravity of some elements of our society. And this is called the Squid Game. Now, Squid Game is a South Korean survival drama television series that is streaming currently on Netflix. And whilst I've not seen it, but I've overviewed it, it's kind of like an Asian version of the Hunger Games. And Song Ji-hun, who is a divorced and indebted chauffeur, is invited to play a series of children's games for a chance at a very large cash prize. Except it's children's games for adult children. Except these are neither. But the analogy should not be lost on the listeners. Now, accepting the offer, he is taken to an unknown location where he finds himself among 455 other players who are also deeply in debt. And the players are made to wear green tracksuits and are kept under watch at all times by masked guards in pink jumpsuits, with the games overseen by the front man, who wears a black mask and black uniform. The seducement of money is what spawns shows like this and what they're saying about us. And the power that it has over people. Now, the green tracksuits could also be reminiscent of the green program MKUltra. And the front man with the black mask and uniform can be anything from the hidden string pullers to the people on TV or otherwise who wear face masks to cover their real identity, kind of like Joe Biden. Now, the players soon discover that losing a game results in their death, and with each death adding 100 million won, W-O-N, to the potential $45.6 billion won prize money, which is around $38 million. Now, it's interesting that Korean currency is called won, or won, W-O-N, which is fitting as only the few won. And South Korea is no different to the rest of the world in those terms. Now, Ji-hun's allies with other players in the game, including his childhood friend Cho Sang-woo, to try to survive the physical and psychological twists of the games. And Lee Jung-jae as Seong Ji-hun, who is a chauffeur and a gambling addict, lives with his mother and struggles to support his daughter financially. And he participates in the game to settle his many debts and prove himself to be financially stable, to then get the custody of his daughter before she leaves for the United States with her mother and stepfather. That's two films we've mentioned in the last two shows where they're talking about people leaving Asia and going to America. Is that a pointer? But the psychology behind this is they create desperate times and situations, and people often resort to desperate measures to get back in the game. You see, life is all a game, like the world is all a stage. But the key to it is to play your game, not theirs. Now, Park Hae-soo as Sho Sang-woo is the head of the investment team at a securities company, and he is junior to Ji-hun and was a gifted student who studied at Seoul National University, but is now wanted by the police for stealing money from his clients. And he was underwater, billions of won in debt, and even mortgaged off his mother's place. Now, Wee Ha-jun, who is a police officer who sneaks into the game as a guard to find his missing brother. And Jung Ho-yeon is a North Korean defector who enters the game to pay for a broker to find and retrieve her surviving family members who are still across the border. And she wants to live in a house with her younger brother and mother. All sad cases, and they always provide an even sadder solution. That's the gist of this series and game. Now, Oh Young-soo as Oh Il-nam is an elderly man with a brain tumour who prefers playing the game as opposed to waiting to die in the outside world. But it's an interesting choice of character given the global discussion on assisted suicide being discussed at the moment. Now, Hyo Sung-tae is a gangster who enters the game to settle his massive gambling debts. Anupam Tripathi as Abdul Ali is a foreign worker from Pakistan who enters the game to provide for his young family after his employer refuses to pay him for months. And Kim Yoo-ah-young is a mysterious and manipulative woman who claims to be a poor single mother. And it's all desperate and in some cases valid reasons of trying to make things better when it actually makes things worse. The clowns love those who are desperate or have committed wrong acts, as they then leverage them into doing their dirty work in return for wiping the slate clean. But it's never clean dancing with those people. And what ends up is people just jump from one desperate decision and circumstance to another. Now, other characters in the movie are, which is indicative, a doctor who secretly works with a group of corrupt guards to traffic the organs of the dead participants in exchange for information on up-and-coming games. How ironic that art matches life in Asia and many other countries. Another is a young woman who is just released from prison after killing her abusive father. And prisons are often places the agencies pick up their recruits, knowing they are easily expendable. Another participant was a pastor who rediscovers his faith during the game, really. A glassmaker, a husband and wife, and a henchman are some of the other participants. And a salesman who recruits participants, the broker-type character, sleazy snake oil marketeer people. And the front man, well, as for the front man, that can be seen as the handler. And so here is a synopsis of the episodes, which defy belief, really. And Seong, in the first one, Ji-hun is down on his luck, having accumulated enormous debts with loan sharks while becoming estranged from his daughter and ex-wife. And at a train station, he's asked by a well-dressed man to play a game of Dakji, double D A K J I, Dakji, for money. And the man gives Ji-hun a card, inviting him to play games with higher stakes. And this is the classic hustle and seduction program. and Ji-hun accepts and is knocked unconscious and taken to a mysterious location with 455 other players who awaken in a dormitory and are identified by numbers on their tracksuits. Sounds like an agency sting for Manchurian Candidates and MKUltra mind control, of which we'll find more about that soon. And the location is then managed by masked staff in pink jumpsuits and overseen by the frontman, masked and dressed in black. Now, all the players are all in dire financial straits and will be given billions of won in prize money if they win 6 games over 6 days. And Ji-hun befriends player 1, who is an elderly man suffering from the brain tumour, and recognises among the players Sho Sang-woo, who is a former classmate and investment broker, and player 67, who was a pickpocket who stole Ji-hun's money after winning a horse race bet. And what this showing is the interconnectedness, because that's where the AI database picks these type of people out for certain other real games, not the series. And the first game is called Red Light, Green Light. And those who lose are killed on the spot, which is revealing the sadistic nature of the games. And Ji-hun is saved from falling by player 199, who is a Pakistani foreign worker and is able to complete the game. Remember the red and green lights, particularly the latter, used by Drake for the mass arrest program? Green and red lights were almost as popular as the 2 weeks mind control meme. And one has to ask, given the US control South Korea is, did the CIA write or were involved in this script? In episode 2, more than half the players are killed in the first game, and a few horrified survivors beg to leave. And according to the 3rd clause of the game's agreement, if the majority vote to end the games, all players will be sent home, but no money will be given. And the players vote, and player 01 deciding vote has all of them sent home safely. And then Ji-hun goes to the police, but no one believes him, except Detective Hwang Jun-ho, whose missing brother received the same invitation card as Ji-hun. And all players are then given the chance to return to the games, and many do so due to desperation, including Ji-hun, whose mother needs surgery. And that is a classic binary choice option again. Be killed in the game or be killed financially, emotionally or spiritually outside of the game. It is no choice. Now Sang-woo is about to be arrested for financial fraud, player 01 who does not wish to die on the outside, and player 67 who wishes to rescue her parents from North Korea and get her little brother out of an orphanage, player 199 who attacked and gravely injured his boss for withholding his wages for months, and player 101 a gangster on the run from gambling debts. And Jun-ho secretly follows Ji-hun when he is picked up by the game staff. Now in episode 3, Jun-ho successfully infiltrates the games by disguising himself as a masked worker, a bit like Biden then. And it's revealed that the location is a remote island. The remote island is often used in these types of psychological dramas, because quite often those islands are remote and hardly anyone on this planet is aware of how many islands there are, and to do untold horror zone. Japan's got 6,500 islands alone. We wouldn't know what goes on. It's like what we found out about Epstein Island and next door Branson and his island. But that could be going on thousands of islands, and we wouldn't even know because we don't even know they exist. But the players are now more prepared and are starting to form alliances. And Ji Hun Sang-woo, player 1, player 199 team up, and player 67 explores an air vent and witnesses workers melting pots of sugar. And in the second game, the players are to pick a stamped shape out of a dalgona. So what is a dalgona? Well, a dalgona, or poppyji, is a Korean candy made with melted sugar and baking soda, and it was a popular street snack back in the 1970s and 80s, and is still eaten as retro food. Now, Sang-woo recognises the game after learning from player 67's discovery, but does not warn his teammates and chooses the simplest shape for himself. And Ji Hun ends up picking the most difficult shape, which is an umbrella. These are all codes. The umbrella. It won't be of relevance to us, but it will be for who it's targeting. But he is able to complete the game by licking the honeycomb to melt it. And player 212, who is a rowdy and manipulative woman, helps Deok-soo complete the game with a smuggled lighter. And a scared player takes a staff member hostage and forces him to unmask himself. Now, shocked that the staff member is only a young man, the player kills himself, and the staff member is killed by the front man for revealing his identity. Yes, the front man is a handler, and used a classic agency tactic of, if the agent is exposed, delete him or her to prevent them talking and exposing their operation or crimes. Player 4, or episode 4, player 111, who is the disgraced doctor who works with a handful of staff to harvest organs from the dead players to then sell on the black market in return for information on up-and-coming games. And Ji Hun realises that Sang-woo could have helped their team in the Dalgona game, but remains quiet. Now, the staff then decide to foment discord among the players to weed out the weak ones. Again, this is a classic agency troll or shield tactic, that is, the connections to the agency or mafias rack up in this show, it seems. Foment discord. It's divide and conquer. Now, Deok-soo kills another player over food, which results in the prize money being increased. Because you've killed someone, the prize money goes up. And it's all very Hunger Games again. Now, after lights out, a riot erupts and more players are killed. And player 67 joins Ji Hun's team to protect her from Deok-soo's gang. And now the real game has begun, as the organisers have everyone in fear and attacking each other. And that's how it plays out, does it not, in real life? And when player 1 begs everyone to stop, the front man ends the riot. And Ji Hun's team exchange names to build trust, and player 199, Ali Abdul, and player 67, player 1, due to his brain tumour, has trouble remembering his name. And what is interesting is the player who went into the game just to die quicker is playing peacemaker to keep people alive. And the frontman handler abided by his wishes. which suggests that player is a double agent or a patsy. Now, player 212 has sex with Deok-soo in exchange for protection. And yes, a case of real desperation and coercion on the promise of keeping themselves safe. But that's not how this game or life works. And yet it's used ever so often. Now, in the third game, players are told to form groups of 10, and Baeyok recruits player 240, who is a girl close to her age, and the game is revealed to be a tug-of-war on 2 raised platforms, where a team wins by dragging the opposition team off their platform and to their deaths. And that sounds like the Rothschilds versus the Black Sun to me. 2 raised platforms, 2 teams. And Deok-soo, learning about the game from player 111 beforehand, picks only strong men and rejects Mi Neo, who joins Ji-hun's team. And after Deok-soo's team wins their match, Ji-hun's team struggles against another all-male team and is on the verge of defeat. And in episode 5, in spite of having weaker players, Ji-hun's team managed to win their tug-of-war match with player 1's strategy and Sang-woo's quick thinking. Now, anticipating another riot, they build a barricade and spend the night taking turns on guard, but Deok-soo's team doesn't attack. And Ji-hun reminisces on a similar situation from 10 years ago, when he and many other workers from a car parts factory protested a mass layoff, which caused the failed trajectory of Ji-hun's life. It always repeats, you see. And Jun-ho witnesses the organ harvesting racket as the staff member whose identity he stole was part of it. And save Jun-ho, everyone involved in the racket is eventually killed, including player 111. And the frontman begins a facility-wide manhunt for Jun-ho, who later breaks into the frontman's office, and he learns that the game has been running for over 30 years, and that his brother Hwang In-ho was the winner in 2015. And yes, another example of what is perceived as being new, like technology, and it's just rehashed from the past in unerring loop-style fashion. Now, in episode 6, the players are instructed to proceed to the game hall, where they see player 111, who is the doctor, and his co-conspirators' bodies were strung up and receive an apology, as player 111 had an unfair advantage due to the games being prided on treating everyone equally, regardless of their status in the outside world. Now, for the fourth game, players are told to pair up, and Sang-woo, who's close with Ali, picks him, and Ji-hun, who has compassion for player 1, chooses him. Player 240 picks, Baeyok, and expecting that they will be working with their partner, the players are horrified to learn that they will actually be playing against their partner in a marble game of their choice. And whoever gets all their partner's marbles within 30 minutes will win and survive. Again, messing with people's heads, you see. And Baeyok and player 240 talk about their lives, and Ji Jeong decides that Baeyok has more to live for and intentionally loses the marble game to be killed. And Sang-woo tricks Ali into giving up his marbles and wins, letting Ali be killed. Now, Ji-hun was about to lose again and turns the game around by using player 1 failing memory against him, even though doing so unnerves him. and player 1 reveals that he knew Ji-hun was tricking him the whole time, but allows Ji-hun to win anyway as his Ganbu, double G-A-N Bu, which means trusted friend. But before being killed, 001 remembers his name, Oh-il-nam. And Ji-hun, Sang-woo and Se-byok are all traumatized by the deaths of their partners. And it's the classic case of life and death. And the service to self-culture rears its head here. We should not and should never be put into those drastic choices in life. For example, the elderly in the UK, and no doubt many other places, are forced every winter to decide in between eat or heat. Every winter. And that is just wrong on all levels. In episode 7, before we go into the break, player 69, who defeated his wife in the marble game, is heartbroken and commits suicide. And foreign VIP guests arrive and are welcomed by the frontman on behalf of his boss, who is the host. And the VIPs are wealthy patrons who wager on the games and watch them live. And again, all reminiscent of the Hunger Games movie. The VIPs are the elites who do actually play these games in private and publicly for their own amusement. And no, I'm not joking either. They're destroyed by their own greed and lust for power. Because once you've screwed so many girls or men, bought every materialistic item going, done every drugs, they end up turning to the more darker pleasures in life and lose all touch with reality. And these scenario games they wickedly plan out, and it's like going to a ball game or theatre for these people. And Jun-ho, who is now posing as one of the masked servants, is sexually propositioned by a VIP. And in a private room he attacks the VIP and interrogates him for info, and recording the VIP's confession on his phone, but before escaping the island with a scuba kit. Now the frontman spots him and pursues him. And in the 5th game, the players have 16 minutes to cross a high bridge with panels made of either tempered or regular glass, the latter of which cannot support their weight. And most of the players at the front of the line fall to their deaths as the panels are tested. And that is representing the proverbial glass ceiling, is the analogy here. Sink or swim, live or die. But you are forbidden from going above your station or glass ceiling. As above, so below. And when Deok-soo gets to the front, he refuses to move despite the clock ticking. And Min-yo grabs him and, as revenge for betraying her, takes him down with her to their deaths. Sang-woo angrily pushes player 17 when he takes too long, killing him to reveal the last trick panel. And Ji-sun, Sang-woo and Se-byok are the only 3 to complete the game. And this passes off as entertainment? Seriously? We're now going to episode 8, and there's one more after that. And as the finalists Ji-hun, Sang-woo and Se-byok are given a change of clothes and a fancy steak dinner, and it's revealed that Se-byok was badly wounded in the previous game, having been stabbed by a piece of flying glass when the bridge shattered, and is swiftly bleeding out. And when dinner is cleared, each of them is left with a knife. And the temptation game they run on us also, known in agency circles as a sting. Another type of sting and variant of sting is smart. But after lights out, Ji-hun suggests to Se Byok that they should ally against Sang-woo, and realizing he will go to any length to win. And Se instead begs Ji-hun to promise that whoever wins the game will look after the other's loved ones. And Ji-hun goes to kill Sang-woo when he falls asleep, but Se stops him, telling him he is not a murderer. Now Se's injuries worsen, prompting a desperate Ji-hun to run and call for help. And Se is killed by Sang-woo when Ji-hun is away, and the staff arrive only to collect her body. And meanwhile, Jun-ho makes it to another island, but is quickly tracked down by the frontman and the staff. And to Jun-ho's shock, the frontman reveals himself to be his brother, In-ho. And In-ho then shoots Jun-ho in the shoulder, causing Jun-ho to fall over a cliff and disappear into the water. And again, what this is saying here is it proving how family members turn against each other when the need, desperation, or call arises. Episode 9, the final game, is eponymous Squid Game. And after a long and brutal fight in the rain, Ji-hun defeats Sang-woo but refuses to complete the game. And he attempts to invoke the game's third clause so that he and Sang-woo can leave alive. But Sang-woo stabs himself in the neck. And again, echoing the final act of the Hunger Games, Katniss and Peter, with the hero having the name of a cat, spelt with a K. How apt is that, as we have found out? And as he dies, Sang-woo asks Ji-hun to use the prize money to help his mother, and the traumatized Ji-hun returns home to find his own mother has passed away. And a year later, Ji-hun remains traumatized and has barely touched his prize money. And one night he receives a game invitation card, and to his shock, he finds Oh Il-nam, player 1, still alive, but dying from his brain tumour. I guess my earlier prediction of him being a patsy was correct. Now, Il-nam is revealed to be the mastermind behind the game, which he created to entertain the bored ultra-rich like himself, while testing if humanity had any innate goodness left in it. Now, it may be a coincidence, but Il is the international code for Israel, and Nam reversed is man. So 01 was an Israeli man, if that was the case. It may be indicative. And he reminds Ji-hun that despite allowing the players to leave, many returned willingly. And therein lies the problem, people's greed. And the specific games are based on Il-nam's childhood, it is said, and he had participated himself for nostalgia's sake. And as they talk, the two see an unconscious man lying on a street corner, and Il-nam asks Ji-hun to bet if someone will come and help him before midnight. and Ji-hun wins and Il-nam dies, presumably after witnessing his loss. And Ji-hun fulfills his promise to say bye-okay and Sang-woo and leaves for the airport to reconnect with his daughter in Los Angeles. And en route he sees someone playing the Dakji game with the same game recruiter who found him. There's agents everywhere. And he angrily snatches the player's card, and before boarding his plane he calls the card's number, demanding to know who is still running the games. And the front man orders him to get off the plane, or get on the plane, and Ji-hun ends the call and stays in Seoul, determined to stop the games once and for all. But with psychopaths, the game never ends. This is what they think and do. But if nobody plays their games, then they die automatically from lack of harvesting others' energy. Now, the show received critical acclaim, which shows you how stupid critics are. And I bet the elites involved in this laughed at the snivelling critics' apparent lack of understanding of what they were saying or doing with this series. In jumps the snake oil people on the back of the series. Fashion brand Louis Vuitton announced Young Ho Yeon as their new global ambassador for fashion, watches and jewellery. The typically vacuous cretins never miss an opportunity for marketing the cattle, it seems. Now, one of the phone numbers, and this is how bizarre people are, one of the phone numbers used in the show belonged to a private resident who reported receiving up to 4,000 calls each day from people, several of whom desired to play a real-life version of the game. Which shows how stupid many of the public are. Anything for money and oblivious to the cost, typically non-thinking bots. Now, as the series was introduced ahead of the 2022 South Korean presidential election, several of the candidates began using some of the Squid Game imagery in their political ads and challenging opponents to similar games. All promoted by the equally vacuous cretins and the world's largest puppet factory. Them taking each other out would do many people a favour, and perhaps they, like the CIA, already are. Bizarrely, a diplomatic cable from the United States Department of State was sent to the show and said at the heart of the show's dark story is the frustration felt by the average Korean, and particular Korean youth, who struggle to find employment, marriage or upward mobility, proving that grim economic prospects are indeed at the centre of Koreans' society's woes. From the Department of State. You would think they would have better things to do than be critics of a series. Well, apparently not. And someone needs to remind them that this country's populace has all the same problems as they highlighted with Korea, with vastly inflated numbers. Now, the vendors of Dalgona, the honeycomb candy featured in the second game, both within Korea and internationally, found a significant increase in sales after the show's release. And everyday clothing items matching those worn in the show saw large growths in sales in the weeks after the show's initial broadcast, such as Vans slip-on shoes, which spiked 7,800%. and Variety attributed this sales increase in part to the preparation for Halloween costumes that was inspired by the show. And vendors of other costume props that mirrored those in the show, such as the guards' masks, also saw spikes in sales in advance of Halloween following the show's premiere. And yet again, that highlights how gullible and stupid people are for following trends their slave masters leave for them. And shortly after the show's release, users of social media adapted some of the games featured in Squid Game as internet challenges, including the first red light, green light game and the second honeycomb cookie game. And users of video games supporting user-created content such as Roblox, Fortnite Creative, and Grand Theft Auto Online created numerous games within these systems that were based on one or more of the Squid Game challenges. And some groups also work to organise safe mock Squid Game events for fans of the show. A number of schools around the UK observed that despite the show being aimed at mature audiences, you're not mature, young children were emulating some of the games from the Squid Game during the school recess and warned parents about these activities. Again, evidence of non-thinking bots. Oblivious to the fact that 455 people, or 454 I should say, because 2 never died, people died in horrible circumstances and only 2 survived, one of which was a patsy. And this series in the game is a psychological mind control program. And they will analyse all who engaged that series. Who were their favourite characters? What was their favourite part? And data mine all of it. To then target certain ones who have ticked all their predetermined boxes. And that is called profiling. And like the experimental jab people blindly took, those engaged in this have all just been profiled for potential future uses. And what they are looking for is, are there more critical thinkers questioning this? Are the public suddenly going away from violence and controlling movies or series? And are the people now starting to be more empathic? And are they starting to mass together and away from the system's plans, plots and schemes to make us all as evil as them? And that series is an overview of what we do to each other. And you can't blame the cabal for that. And also how the game organisers pushes into doing their work for them, much to their own great amusement. And we have to stop and think of each action we do and take. Is this beneficial for us all? And then make the required changes. We will make man in our image and likeness springs to mind with this series. And this series is their further attempts to do that to us. And only we can stop that.